Welcome to the Opinionated Benchwarmers Podcast, episode 178. Your opinionated benchwarmers are back to do what we do best. That's discuss sports. Obviously, we only got two here today. Got my brother Ramon in here. Shout out to Los. He'll be on the next week's episode. But look, Ramon, how you feeling, man? Ready to talk some sports?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. That's what's bringing the energy, talking sports. We always kind of check in right before we get started, keeping it real with everybody. We were just talking about everything we got going on right now, kind of how work and everything like that been. So just been a lot going on. Maybe a little bit tired, but every time we start talking sports, I feel like that energy kind of comes back. So I like to do what we do best, man. But I want to, kind of flip it a little bit because you always checking in on us. But I know the listeners probably be like, man, Rob don't get the love. Why they don't check in on Rob? So I gotta find out. I gotta get the pulse of my boy. How you doing, bro?
Hey man, I'm doing good, man. I'm back, like you said. I like doing this with you guys, and obviously Los not here, but he'll be on next week. But whenever I'm able to talk sports with my brother, it's a real privilege to do this week in and week out. The love and support that we've been receiving, man, it keeps me going. So I'm doing good. Outside of my Saints doing terrible, but LSU, they had me on a high on that Saturday night, and then I came down immediately Sunday evening. But it's okay. It's good, right? We
You just gotta
we'll
think
get
about the
through
good. You just gotta think
it.
about the good, bro. Don't even
Yeah.
think about the Saints right now. Just continue to ride through the wind, man.
Right. I'm about 2 more weeks. I'm taking this towel down and that helmet in the background. No, but seriously, as I always like to lead off the episode, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. Wherever you listen to your podcast at, make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube. That's how you can find out when we drop content or get notified. Hit the bell, get notified, and share it with a friend. Obviously, I've gotten away from saying it, but that's important. Word of mouth is the best marketing tactic. So if you like what you hear today, make sure that you share that. Shout out to the first time listeners. Shout out to the first time people ever seen us on YouTube. And shout out to the ones that's been with us since day one. We've been doing this for a while. As you heard, episode 178. You got to put in a little work to get there, huh, Ramon? You gotta put in some time. But we're not gonna waste any more time. Ramon, like I said, we coming off a big win as LSU fellow LSU Tiger fans. LSU number 13th at the time, ranked knocked off Ole Miss, who was ranked number 9 at the time. Man, I think this is one of those games we probably will remember for the rest of our lives, and we've been watching LSU even before we went there, from Louisiana, born and raised. I live in the DMV, but I rep LSU every time I get a second to do so and let people know where I'm coming. But, when you think about some of the games, you think about the Bama game a couple years back, the game winning touchdown that Mason Taylor caught. It's just certain things and certain memories that will always be imprinted in your mind. And this game, although we started out the gates a little slow offensively, I thought Nuss had to settle in the game throughout the game. He made some boneheaded throws, but he made some great throws as well. But it was one of those games that we can talk about endlessly. We've seen it time and time again. But Ramon, you have to think that this game was kind of like up there with the special ones that we've been a part of in our history watching LSU football.
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. I think that to that point, it kind of was very fitting that this year is the big celebration of 100 years, of Tiger Stadium or 100 years of Death Valley. And so you look at it being homecoming weekend for LSU, them deciding that, hey, now we're not going to schedule kind of a team that's not the cream of the crop. We're going to have homecoming. We're going to bring Ole Miss into here, a team that you had, an on and off rivalry with for so many years. And so you see them coming to Death Valley. And honestly, I think that a big portion of this win could be attributed to the fan base. It was pretty much kind of that 12th man experience. If I just call it for what it is, I don't think that LSU wins that game if that game is played at Ole Miss. I don't think that LSU wins that
Yeah.
game if it's not played in Tiger Stadium. And so it just showed that how that stadium can come alive and what that truly means. And you talked about, we've been a part of some special games in that stadium, and there's nothing like that atmosphere. Like, I don't think I would put any sports atmosphere above going into Tiger Stadium at night and playing an intense game there. But then when you get down to the specifics of the game, obviously, as you mentioned, Nussmeier, it was the give and take, the Jekyll and Hyde, it was the the good and the bad, and it was pretty much almost equal throughout the game. It was kind of a one of those typical Brett Favre type games where he's gonna make some good plays and then he's gonna be a gunslinger and do some things that's head scratching. But to me, the biggest storyline, and I don't want to take all the time, but to me, the biggest storyline from that game was ultimately how this defense has continued to progress. You look at a defense that last season was probably, I would venture to say, you can tell me what you think. It was the worst defense that I've seen in LSU history for me personally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
you won't get no argument here.
Right. And so you look at this season and you look at the way that Blake Baker has helped this team to progress with them sustaining big time injuries. They lost Harold Perkins, who was thought of to be their best defensive player. They also lost Jacoby and Guillory, who was thought to be their best defensive lineman. And so you're down, two of your top guys. You're playing, true freshmen along the D line. You are, playing without the same depth that you have from a linebacker standpoint, but you're seeing this team develop and be better week in and week out. And Ole Miss is a team that is known for what they do offensively. We know that Lane Kiffin, even though that team has been much better this year defensively, we know that he's typically an offensive mind. And so to see that defense come in and kind of get stop after stop, to see that defense have 6 sacks in that game, to see Whit Weeks have 18 tackles, 2 for loss, a sack, and things of that sort, after almost getting kicked out of the game for what would have been a ridiculous call.
I would have lost my you know what if he would have got kicked out the game
Right.
for that soft hit. Uh yeah, I mean
Yeah, but saying
I agree.
all that to
Yeah.
say, it was just the heck of a win, and like I said, I'll throw it back to you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was you hit on it. I don't have much on to add. As you talk about historically how bad our defense have been the last 2 years, and then you look at the first play of the game, like you mentioned, the crowd. I mean, I knew it was going to be a long night for Ole Miss when one of the first plays was a false start on their first drive, and then second down, it was the ironic thing that you talked about is like, okay, how's this defense going to hold up? Ashton Stamps get beat bad by Trey Harris. And luckily, Trey Harris dropped that ball. I don't know how he dropped that ball. Probably one of the best receivers in the country. Dropped a give me touchdown. So immediately in the game, from first down to second down to that first drive, you saw that was the game right there. It was peaks and valleys. It was lows and highs. It was Ole Miss and Ole Miss, as you said, penalties after penalties and constantly shot themselves in the foot. But it's been interesting to see LSU, and I'll add on even another, not to stay too long here, but the Cavalry's coming, man. We know what this 2025 class looking like. Jaheim Stewart, defensive tackle, reclassified to 25 to year 25. I mean, we got to think LSU is one of the favorites to get him, along with Oregon and Ohio State, probably up there. We're in the top three, and then we already have the number one corner coming. We just had a 4-star commit to us over the weekend. Like, we got those reinforcements. So I think that it's important, like you said, with the injuries that we have going on in the secondary and defensively. We lost Perkins. It's important for Weeks to get those reps. And, we got to shout out Swinton too. I know he's a senior, but he's playing out of his mind this season, and he made a lot of pivotal plays. And I would say Perkins is big shoes to fill, but you could feel, Swenson's impact and what he meant to that game. But let's get back to Nuts and how you feel about Nuts going forward in this LSU team.
Yeah, yeah. As it relates to Nuts, man, like we said, it's the good with the bad. Nuts has the typical kind of skills, the tools. He has the arm strength. He has the arm talent. But it's always been, is he gonna force some things? Is he gonna be too much of a gunslinger? Will he make the right read each and every time? And so I think that for me, the area that I actually want to see Nussmeier grow the most is his ability to, when the field opens up, to take off and use his legs. I think that when you
Big
watch,
opportunity. Yeah.
yes, I think that when you watch Nussmeier, people would actually think that Nuss is a statue back there because he doesn't really
He could
move.
throw.
But Nuss
Yeah.
is athletic. Like, Nuss is obviously, he's nothing in the class of what Jaden Daniels can do. But I would venture to say Nuss is as athletic as what Joe Burrow was from a running capability standpoint, but he just doesn't see the field in that way. It's just all he sees is I got to find somebody. I got to throw it downfield and things of that sort, and doesn't realize that there are times when the field opens up, he can utilize his legs, and that's honestly going to open up things even more for his receivers down the field when the teams have to focus on that as well too. And so I think kind of going forward, to me, he's proved that I still would put him in the upper half, as far as like SEC quarterbacks that are there. And I think that he can still guide LSU to a good, probably 10-2, maybe 9-3 type season. But it's not that kind of elite level that we had obviously seen in the Jaden Daniels of the world or the Joe Burrows, but he's definitely, a couple of tiers below that.
Yeah, and I would love for Los to have been on this podcast because we had plenty of offline conversations, and you
Yeah.
have as well. But of how we felt about Nuss coming into this season, and what I've landed on, and what I can agree with Los, and which he believes, and he said, and I'm comfortable in quoting him, is that he is inconsistent. And that was something that I tried to fight off earlier in the year, top five quarterback in stats across the board in the nation. He's completing over 70%. He's at 68% QBR right now of his passes. I thought all of that stuff was good. And I think statistically it's hard to argue against Nuss. But when you look at him and you look at a game, I think I began to see it in the South Carolina game when the stakes are high, when, he can tend to do things where you're like, what is he doing? But then you can look at that, game winning touchdown to Lacey, and you're like, oh my goodness, he just flicked his wrist and the ball's there. Or he's anticipating, Xavier Thomas to hit the slant, and he hit him. Who shout out to Xavier for stepping up as well with a banged up wide receiver room where we have. But he's inconsistent. That's what I label him. But I will say this, Ramon. I don't know if you agree with me. We can move on. Maybe we spent too much time here, but I do feel as though this is his first year as a starter, as we both know. And we know how Burrow started off his first season, and we know how Jaden started off his first season with him. Both of these quarterbacks won Heisman's, as we know. But I feel as though Nuss may be further along in his first year than even Joe Burrow and Jade. And that sounds nuts. But I think statistically and just the way that I'm looking at it, I think that the things that he needs to correct, he can easily correct. But I feel like his command of the offense is there, his pocket presence is there, and if they keep him clean, he can get the ball where it needs to go.
Yeah, yeah. I think that ultimately it comes down to, as we talked so many times, decision making with Nuss. Everything else is there ultimately with him. And I do agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think that people do get caught up, obviously, in what Joe Burrow and what Jaden Daniels Heisman years look like, and don't really realize that it was building blocks that first year that they came to LSU and were, fully starters within the offense. Now, what I will say is that the one thing, the difference, especially from a Jaden standpoint, is that Jaden really took care of the ball. But I think the difference there is that we kept saying, Jaden, will you throw it? He wouldn't let
Yeah.
it go.
That first year I was like, bro, you gotta throw the ball. Like
Yeah.
you gotta throw the ball.
And then you get the
Uh,
opposite with Nuts on his heels, and he's still letting that sucker fly. Like, but
and it's
no,
getting there, bro. I ain't gonna lie, he got one of the most beautiful releases in the country. To me,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
he got elite arm talent. Shador, that's a class. Ears, Manning, that's a class of their own. But I think Nuss is in that second, like you said, mid tier. But LSU, the rankings came out. We ranked number 8 right now in the country. Where do you see us going forward? That was a huge win. By the way, 29-26 overtime win. LSU knocked off Ole Miss. Ole Miss is pretty much out of contention. Again, queer quickly. What do you see LSU's trajectory from here?
Yeah, I think that honestly, LSU will finish the regular season probably with probably about two losses, I want to say at this point. I think that they're going to slip up at another game, between having to play Texas A&M, still having to play Alabama. Also, I think having Oklahoma later in the season as well, too. It's going to be kind of difficult for LSU to win out. You're going to see LSU in the midst of a lot of tough games like they were with Ole Miss. Like it came down to the end with South Carolina. That's just going to be kind of the MO. You're not going to have LSU where they're blowing teams out or anything of that sort. It's going to be a fight week in and week out. I think that 10-2 would be an amazing finish for LSU. 9-3 is the possibility as well too. I think that you will see LSU probably be a team that's going to be that fringe kind of playoff team that you'll find anywhere from, to me, at the end of the season, 10 to 15, somewhere in that range, with that chance to make the playoffs. If I were to call it, I typically wear an LSU hat and wear LSU glasses as well too. So I'm gonna go ahead and say the Tigers are gonna go be in the playoff. But it's
You
gonna
know,
be a
I've been
tough road.
saying that. I've been
Yeah.
saying that. I've been saying it was going to make the playoffs, especially with the expansion. The way I view it here, Ramon, I agree with you. I think the only team that you would say we shouldn't have issues with is Florida. But then that's a trap spot to look ahead, all coming off the Bama, whatever happens there, which is going to be tough, which I'm thinking that you're counting as probably one of our losses, potentially. Not that you don't have any faith, obviously, but that's where I'm at with it. I'm thinking Bama will be pretty tough, and then that look ahead spot onto Florida. And then Vandy has proven they beat Bama. They've proven that they're not a cakewalk. And then Oklahoma, you just never know. Oklahoma got their butts kicked by Texas, but you know they're still a formidable opponent. But when I look at this Arkansas game, I think that that's going to tell us all. If we had this huge win, and then we get this deflating loss in Arkansas, it is very, very possible for LSU to be hung over going into Arkansas. Now, I will say this: that Brian Kelly did say that we would either get C.J. Daniels or Chris Hilton, who hasn't played all year. We know Chris Hilton can take the top off defense. We've been missing that all year long. Just somebody that with just pure speed that could take the top off defense. I don't expect him to be back. I'll believe it when I see it. But the fact that he says him or CJ Daniels will be back, I'm thinking CJ Daniels will be back, which will help us a lot. We need him. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Just everything CJ Daniels does on the field, even when he's not catching the ball, great route runner, great blocker. He does all of the things that sometimes you don't even really see when you just plainly watching the game. So, yep.
yep. So yeah, let's get back. Let's get to a little NFL here, Ramon. We're gonna shift it a little bit. Big, huge news that's been making all the news outlets. Obviously, Davante Adams headed to New York to team up with his buddy, who none other than Aaron Rodgers, who they shared the same team for 8 years, where they were able to complete and make connections on 622 catches, over 7,000 yards, and 67 touchdowns. So, uh, needless to say, they go good together, right? So, the six-time Pro Bowler, three-time All-Pro is headed to New York. React, Ramon. What you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of angles to look at. I think that the first angle, just from sheerly from the Jets standpoint, I think that that gives them obviously an additional weapon to open things up. You have a guy that's been typically throughout the course of his career a wide receiver one. And so right now, when you look at even that offense now, being able to probably slot Garrett Wilson more into a wide receiver two type role right now at this point, and still having Lazard and what he's done. And really the two-headed, kind of well, let me not say two-headed monster. Maybe they're not totally there yet, but you had that two-headed kind of backfield back there in Brees Hall and Braylon Allen and what they're able to do. And I think that, Aaron Rodgers' familiarity with Davante Adams, I think is gonna allow this to click relatively quickly. You obviously have had to change from a head coach and an offensive coordinator standpoint. And so I think that as much as the owner doesn't want to say much as far as giving Aaron Rodgers credit for this happening or things of that sort. I think that you're going to find things to be a little bit more open and tailored to what Aaron Rodgers wants to do and what he wants to see. And I think that Davante fits, excellently within that. And so I think that it's a solid move from their point of view. They only has to give up a third round conditional pick that can become potentially a second round pick, depending on how some things shake out. But it, to me, wasn't a ton to give up. They did have to take on the complete salary of Davante Adams, so that 11 million. I know that was kind of the big things from the Raiders standpoint, is that they didn't want to continue to or take back any of that salary. But as it relates to the Jets, I mean, it's kind of what you got to do. You got an aging quarterback. You got to pretty much have all the chips in right now. And so that's the decision they made, is to have all the chips in and go get Davante Adams, who is still, a relatively elite wide receiver in this league.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of comparisons of social media of when Randy Moss went from the Raiders to the Patriots. So people are expecting big things and big number years. And I think Devontae got a lot left in the tank. And I think that, you know, you don't miss what you have until it's gone. So it wasn't until he went down and took a drop down in tiers of quarterback to going to Derek Carr and getting passed from Aiden Hutchinson. And I don't know if you watched the receiver documentary, but he just comment, I'm gonna get killed out here. Like, why just throw the ball, throw it, just having when you're used to greatness and you heard Aaron Rodgers, even though I'm not a fan of him throwing Mike Williams under the bus, but just the complexities of where Aaron Rodgers expect out of his receivers. And Davante has that. Needless to say, his resume speaks for itself. I think it was a good move for the Jets, and obviously the Jets are continuing to go for broke. When you look at the list of teams who had the cap space to make this happen seamlessly, the Jets, the Cowboys were two of the teams that could make this happen, and obviously the Jets would make more. The Jets was my guess, even though I was a Saints and hoping that it would happen, but I knew once Derek Carr went out, it was no chance. So good for the Jets. I mean,
Yep.
when you look at them last night on, and in the play, they're missing that. As great as Gary Wilson is, when they're able to focus in on him, then maybe he's not a true wide receiver one yet. But I think that now that Davante is there, he's gonna have a field day. T.
Yeah.
Higgins.
Yeah. That's what so I was just about to ask you, you kind of went into it a little bit, but what do you think this does to Garrett Wilson's fantasy football value? Like, let's kind of take it a little bit of fantasy. What do you think it does to him?
I think it obviously he's going to lose some targets, but I think that two receivers have proven to be relevant, right? With Lazard and Gary Wilson, they've been relevant. They both have been useful fantasy wise. I think that when you have Davante and when you have Gary Wilson, I really think you probably would drop Gary Wilson maybe to a mid tier or a high level wide receiver too. And I think that you would probably look at Davante as a low end wide receiver one, which is still formidable for any of your fantasy teams. So I think
Mhm.
you'll be fine. I don't think you should panic. I think Lazard owners might, but Lazard again is Aaron's guy, so you never know.
You never know. Yeah.
Yep. So then I don't know if I've ever seen a day like this. I know NBA make trades, we make deals all in the offseason, but I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I've never seen two Pro Bowlers on the move on the same day. And that's Amari Cooper was announced that he was traded away to the Buffalo Bills. Now check this, Ramon. He's going into a wide receiver core, right? The leading receiver is Shakur with a whopping 249 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns as the leading receiver for the Bills. And number two comes in as Keon Coleman, who has 201 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, needless to say, the wide receiver room really needed some help. And I think Amari Cooper, who in his own right is a 5-time Pro Bowler, will help with that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And getting Amari, they really have gotten there. Of course, true wide receiver one over there at this point. We know kind of everything that happened in the offseason with Stephon Diggs and how they moved on from that, and they kind of let the cupboard bare a little bit for Josh Allen. They still have been able to make things work from an offensive standpoint, leaned on the running game a little bit more in this year. We've been able to see what James Cook can do, also too, what Ray Davis was able to do coming in. But they still, you got to have that weapon, on the outside. You got to have that wide receiver, that go-to wide receiver one. And I think that they looked at the scope of things and said, you know what, going throughout the course of this season, we're going to need that guy. I think that they've looked at what they have right now and have realized that, maybe the rookie Keon Coleman is not, where they maybe, would want him to be or expected him to be just yet. And so they had to go out and get a guy. And I think that it made sense what they did. You don't have to necessarily, go out and give up, too much, ridiculous compensation to get a guy like Amari Cooper, but he's a guy that's proven, year in and year out. He's a guy that's been proven with different quarterbacks, and he's a guy that's probably, if we be honest, a little bit excited to get away from Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson has
He
arguably become one
stinks.
of the worst starting
He
quarterbacks.
stinks.
That is slowly but surely, and I'm not going to even say slowly. That is surely becoming the worst quarterback. I mean, the worst contract in NFL history. That is
I mean,
terrible.
do we have another 30 minutes to discuss all of the Cleveland Browns questionable decisions as a franchise?
Yeah.
If we had another hour to discuss, Ramon, maybe this is another pop for another day. I just want to discuss my Saints included. You wonder why there are so many bottom and low tier franchises. These guys make quadruple of what I make, and the decisions that they make. I am Ramon. I'm no expert. We watched the game. Maybe I am expert. I've been watching and covering this for years. But I'm like, man, some of the decisions that these organizations make, it just don't. You're like, oh, we're gonna give the largest contract to a quarterback guaranteed who hadn't
T.
played football in 2 years. Ramon, 2 years. We know that football, you step away for 6 months, yet alone 2 years. But I mean, I like the trade,
Yeah,
and like I said, I watched Amari. I saw him in person with Deshaun, and I saw a guy that still has a lot of juice in the tank. His route running is second to none. His speed is and explosiveness is still there. His ability to create separation is there. He just needs somebody to get him the ball, and that is what Josh Allen is getting. And Josh Allen can do it. If you watched them last night, I think that the Buffalo Bills, they got a lot of cross routes. They have a lot of short and mid stuff, but they don't have that person that's going to take the top off. Now, unlike others, I'm not ready to write Keon Coleman off yet. But it does take a couple years to make those decisions. I think you agree with me there. It takes a couple years for some receivers to get just catch on. I think he is a talent, but while, like you said, while he's there, he has another veteran to learn from. And that's what happened. You see how CD Lamb is thriving. CD Lamb learned from Amari Cooper for the people that don't remember. So I think that as Amari Cooper approaches his third team, he started off with the Raiders, ended up with the Cowboys, now he's with the Browns, now he's with the Bills, fourth team. I think he's going to do well. I think he's going to thrive, and I think that Josh Allen should be excited
yeah,
because Josh
yeah,
Allen started this year off on fire, and I
yeah,
think that this is the shot in the arm that that offense need. And then we know Brady, we know Coach Brady. I
yeah,
know he probably rubbing his hands together too to get a weapon like Amari Cooper. So I like the move, and I like the move for my fantasy team because I have Amari Cooper in my dynasty league, and I don't know, I didn't know what I was going to do with him, but it's nice to see that he has made his way to fantasy relevance. And he's been having a pretty okay year so far,
yeah.
but I think this will take him over the top.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. It's going to be just a good move overall, just kind of really just for the team, for the Bills, but also too, like you said, Amari for the fantasy owners out there, it's definitely will help to raise his stock.
Yes, sir. So as we kind of shift modes here, we're getting jump into fantasy. What a transition. We're getting so good at this. But we're getting to waivers, man. We helping out with waivers. Shout out to people that watch us on YouTube. You get that a little earlier. The audio always come out in the morning. So I don't know what you want to do to get this stuff, but we'll jump into it. We've had a couple good ones so far. And I will start off this one. I don't know who said it. I don't care who takes credit for it, but I'll just throw Tank Bigsby out there. We mentioned him on our last waiver episode, and he is looking more relevant than ever. He looked great in London. I thought that when Etienne went out, I thought that the majority of the snaps and the carries went to him. So I think that if he's still out there, get him. But that's something that we mentioned, so we know what we're talking about. But Ramon, for this week, as we go into fantasy week 7, right? Who are you
Yep.
looking at? Who are you eyeing to add if possible?
Yeah, I think the name that's floating out there, honestly, the name that's probably going to be pretty popular on the waiver wire this week is Sean Tucker. In his performance that he
Come on, all
had,
right, all right. Tread,
right,
tread, tread a little carefully now, brother.
right, in his
Tread,
performance that he
shredded up
had,
my Saints this weekend.
I would
That's messed up,
the team
bro.
that he did it against will go unnamed. Will go unnamed. But I obviously the 136 yards that he had on the ground with his touchdown, definitely
13
was
carries.
13 carries. Definitely was a big time performance. It's still a little bit interesting in that backfield because you still do have Bucky Urban and you do have Rashad White. But to me, Rashad White, just for me personally, has kind of regressed a little bit in that backfield somewhat. And so it's going to be kind of interesting to see moving forward, who gets kind of the lion's share of the carries, but I think that it's worth taking a shot on Sean Tucker just in case, he can continue to produce performances of that sort. I think that for me right now, too, from a waiver wire standpoint, it's almost kind of like handcuff season, waiver wire wise. So I think that we were able to see as well too on Monday Night Football what Ray Davis looked like, what the rookie looked like coming onto the field and filling in for James
Yeah.
Cook. If that injury continues to hamper James Cook, he is someone that you can look at that may be able to be a plug and play within your lineup as well. And then I mean, I guess I don't want to take all the names. You may have some names as well too. So I'll stop at
Yeah,
those two names and yeah.
yeah, I mean that's good. That's good stuff though. When you mention Cook with a toe injury, those things are lingering.
Yeah.
So with how Ray Davis looked, even if Cook comes back, I think that Ray has the talent to, even dating back to his Kentucky days, could take
Yeah.
over that backfield. And I feel the same way with Tank Bigsby, and I feel the same way with Sean Tucker.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to get these guys and you position these guys. Rashad White has been inconsistent for the past 2 years. What made him fantasy relevant last year was just pure volume. He's not efficient, but when you look at a Bucky and you look at Sean Tucker, they are clearly the explosive backs. I'm gonna stay along the lines with running backs, and I think another running back that you need to go ahead and snag is Tyron Tracy, which I am upset about because I messed around in one of my leagues and was just thinking about who I wanted to drop to get him. And while I was thinking about that throughout the day, he was snagged. And I regret it because I think that even if Devin Singletary comes back, Tyron Tracy probably will take over that backfield and will have the majority of the carries. He just looks like the more explosive and the better back, quite
Yeah.
honestly. So I would say Tyron Tracy, if he's still on your waivers, I would target him to stay on the running back trend. And then wide receiver wise, if I'm gonna give you one, I think you should go ahead after my boy Ramon's guy, and that's Josh Downs. If you haven't got him yet, guys, he's for real. He's flying under the radar in a lot of leagues. This probably will be the last week you'll be able to get him, but I definitely would scoop him up and put him somewhere, and you can start him immediately as a flex.
Yep. Yeah. No, definitely agree with that completely. He also sits on my dynasty, one of my dynasty league teams. The last name that I'll mention, still staying kind of to me for that theme of the handcuff running back and things of that sort. But I think that it may be, you know, I wouldn't blow the fab or anything like that on this guy, but I think it's worth taking a shot at Isaac Guerrero. I think that we've seen that 49ers backfield is pretty much plug and play. That, Kyle Shanahan offense, honestly, you've seen, running back after running back thrive. And that's a conversation maybe for another day of that piece. But he would probably be the last guy that I would mention just because of the injury to also Mason as well. So.
Well, there you go, guys. Go ahead and scoop them up, man. NBA starting on Tuesday, Ramon. Real quick, let me get a quick Laker take from you.
Second round.
I'll go with first. Hey, we appreciate you for hanging out with us. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you like to listen to your podcast on. We are on YouTube. Search Opinionated Benchwarmers. Make sure that you are subscribed. That's how you can get access to our content and get notified when the content drop. But until next time, we are out of here.